Our guest received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Yale University and then attended the University of London, majoring in art history. As an avid lover of the arts, he has been a member of the Fine Arts Committee for the White House as well as a member of the Arts Council at UCLA. He is currently at work on his upcoming film, The House of the Long Shadow, while also starring as Oscar Wilde in Diversions and Delight, a play now at the Westwood Playhouse. To this day, he looks back on a career which includes the Broadway and London theaters, Hollywood films, American and British radio and television, the worlds of art, lecturing, and gourmet cooking. Now I'm here to present Mr. Vincent Price.
How are you? I feel like I was at the
phone's on the side for you to ask questions.
I feel very at home. By the way, it's a wonderful little theater. If any of you have ever been there, it's one of those joyous places to play. I'll tell you a little bit about this now. I started it up in San Francisco under the auspices. I'm sure some of you know it and have seen their productions up in San Francisco. The population of San Francisco has become some of the is very lacking, unfortunately, in Los Angeles, is that we don't have that San Francisco has, where everything goes on in one center. I mean, here, and then schlep home because none of us live down there. It's a difficult town, Los Angeles, to play in, and it's one of the places over there. Years ago, I did a production of T.S. Eliot's The Cocktail Party. It had been a big hit, and in San Diego it had been a big hit. In the town, and we came to Los Angeles, and we were playing at the Biltmore Theater, I'll never forget that one of the great actresses who was in it, I had dinner with the other night, and she is now 100 years old. Really? And I didn't blame her at all. And her hat. Anyway, Estelle, at the end of the first act, I said, "My God, Estelle," I said, "that all I can think of this is like playing to an empty swimming pool." And later, everybody came back, Gary Cooper and all these big-time names, and now we knew at us. Oh, it's a terrible town. I've been trying to really sort of jazz it up culturally, and in theater and the fine arts. I was one of the founders of the Art Council here, the board of the Los Angeles County Museum. And when we were money, I was head of the public fundraisers, and that meant the people who gave $1. We had all those millionaires who wanted their names on the building, and now we had to get out and get some people interested to go to see it once it was open. They still haven't got them, but anyway, that's all right. And I used to go over to Pasadena and out to Pomona and everywhere around the community to try and interest people in the arts in Los Angeles. And one day I thought, gee whiz, I wonder how I can identify with the arts in this town, how I can tell people about the arts. And I was down in San Diego, and I bought one of those little maps, that have from San Diego up to San Francisco, and it has all the missions and the points of interest. And in San Diego, there was the great Balboa Park and the zoo and the theaters and this and that and the other thing. San Francisco, there were 3 museums and parks and Coit Tower and all the wonderful points of interest. And in Los Angeles, the 2 points of interest were the La Brea tar pits and Forest Lawn. Those were the only 2 points of interest in Los Angeles. Well, there it is. Well, I think one of the things that has been most exciting thing in my life, and I've just about to celebrate 45 years in the theater business, as they call it. Why, I don't know. There's not much business going in it. But one of the things that I think has been the most gratifying of my whole life is that I have been a lecturer in colleges for 35 years. I've lectured in over 400 colleges in America, And I think if for no other reason, and certainly the major reason is meeting people and getting to talk with you all and getting exchange of ideas, the major sort of feeling that I have of gratitude for having been allowed to be a lecturer and to be in demand as a lecturer is this extraordinary overall picture I have of America, of the enormous creativity of this country and the enormous energy that there is and the lack of apathy that we are told America has towards the arts. Because really and truly, we are probably the most creative people in the world today. There is the old American joke about looking to the other side of the ocean for arts and appreciation of arts, but really, we in America are probably more appreciative of the arts, more involved in the arts than any other people in the world. And yet we still have a kind of reticence built into ourselves about really coming out and saying, I love it, I want it, it is part of my life and I need it, and it must be a part of my life experience. It is growing, and it is growing tremendous amount out here on the West Coast, which for many years, was a kind of cultural desert. New York made fun of us, everybody made fun of us. I was on juries at the Los Angeles County Museum and the art shows and everything, and everybody sort of made fun of the West Coast. I think it was Aldous Huxley who described Los Angeles as 7 suburbs in search of a city. And he also called it a tour through a sewer in a glass-bottom boat. Which is my favorite expression in the world. But it is really changed, and it has become something wonderful, and largely due to UCLA and USC and the college activities in this town, which have brought people in, and extraordinary thing is beginning to blossom now in California. What I would like to do this morning, since I've been around a long time, and been in sort of a lot more of the areas of the arts than most actors. I have been, as Ms. Young said, I was one of the members of the White House Art Committee. I worked for 15 years in the Department of the Interior with the American Indians. I've been involved in a great many art projects all over the United States and here in Los Angeles. And one of the things that I think I have kept myself aware of what is going on in America in the arts. And I've also had the wonderful opportunity of working all over the world in the other arts, my arts, the arts of the theater, motion picture, and television, radio. And so maybe some of you would like to ask about what is going on in the rest of the world in the arts and the rest of America in the arts, and also what your chances are of surviving in the arts. I am not a fellow in any way who is going to be negative about it. One of the things I do now, and I'm about to go off when I finish the play in Westwood, to lecture and to do residencies in colleges and going into the different areas in the college, in the English departments, the speech departments, drama departments, art departments, and talking to the people, because I think they need a sounding board of someone who's been in it and in whatever way has survived in it, because this is the most important thing, is survival. I did a show last year with Orson Welles, and I was in the Mercury Theater with Orson Welles at the very beginning of it, beginning of his career, and we have remained friends, as actors are friends. Hello, darling, that kind of friends, doesn't matter whether you're a male or a female, you're hello, darling. And we hello, darling each other, but every once in a while we do get to have a marvelous chat. And one night, he and I were on the Johnny Carson show, and we really had a marvelous time because both of us have been in the theater now almost 50 years, and we were talking about what it has been like to be in the theater, what you have had to do to survive in this very public profession. And it hasn't been all just playing the great parts and great TV projects or great theater projects. It's been doing all the little things that you have to do to survive. I remember one time coming here to UCLA and talking to a theater group who were very grand. And one of the questions they said, well, you know, if you're so interested in the theater, how is it possible that you can do movies? Well, that attitude has changed. You know, they were being very grand about the theater and how different it was than the motion pictures. And then they learned to call it the cinema. And now it is cinema and theater. They are both very grand. But then there is this lovely point of view about television. We'll have to get another word for that before it is allowed to become an art. Oh, God. Really, we are the biggest inverted snobs in the world in America. Yeah. But anyway, some of the things that are fun for me to do is answer some of your stupid questions. And let me tell you, I got some stupid answers after all these years, too. I've just to sort of warm you up, I've had some wonderful experiences in the questions. One time I made some stupid remark in a movie magazine, which there aren't any more movie magazines. Now there's the Inquirer. And I think more people read it, but I've never seen anybody buy it. I always read it in the line, you know, when I'm standing in the line with the girl checking, I'm reading all the dirty things in it. But anyway, in some magazine years ago, I made a remark that women had not yet arrived in the arts, and I was talking particularly about the visual arts of painting and sculpture and graphic arts, that men had arrived at, that men were still predominantly the most successful painters in the world. This has also changed enormously. Women now have more vitality than most of the men on canvas. But I made this remark that men were predominantly the greatest artists in the world. And I should have shut my big mouth because immediately I was challenged to a debate down in San Diego by a group of ladies called the Women Painters of the West. Well, let me tell you, I got to meet them. They were wonderful. My wife went along with me, and she met a lot of them. The average age was about 65. And I said, what do you think of them? And she said, oh, they're wonderful. She said, they're a bunch of Dresden dolls made out of reinforced concrete. They were the toughest bunch of broads I ever met in my life. In the first place, there wasn't an inch of the West that they hadn't painted. You know, when that first blossom shows up in that half inch of desert that's left up there near Bakersfield, they're there, you know, with their canvas. Oh, they're wonderful. But anyway, we had some marvelous arguments with these ladies. One lady held up her hand. She's about 90 years old. She'd been a painter all her life, and she said, I agree with you. She said, I agree with you somewhat, but let me tell you something. When I come back into this world, and I intend to, and she'll be back, I'll tell you that. She said, I'm going to be a man. Either I'm going to be a man or I'm going to have a wife, because then I'll get somebody to do everything for me so that I'll have time to paint. Anyway, one of the things that was marvelous was that we came to the conclusion that women had not really broken away into the arts, become involved in the arts, because they were too practical. And I said, gee whiz, you know, that's really a fascinating idea, that women are practical. But it's really true. Women manage this country. Women manage the major portion of the budget. Women manage the home. Women are the people who budget everything, and therefore they are more practical than the men, and the men have the time to go out and do the arts. But that is changing. Oh, yes, you all are so smart. Now you got to do a little bit of it yourself, you know. Get out there and paint. The women are becoming the best painters and the best writers and everything else. It's terrible. The whole thing is changing. It's awful. I won't be around that long anyway. But we'll have a woman president someday, and then we'll have a balanced budget. It's true. Mind you, we won't have much else, but we'll have a balanced budget. So, look, if there are any questions, I'd love to answer them, because that's really half of the fun of the thing. So,
we're over here on either side of the stage waiting for you so everyone can hear us. I have two questions for you. My first question is, having been around the world and been in communities where theater is very much a part of life and where everybody goes to the theater in the evening as a matter of course, what could we as Los Angeles do to make our town more that way?
Go to the theater is one
Well, I
thing.
do, but it's just there's not as much available
I know it. It's very difficult. It really is difficult in this town because there isn't that sort of concentrated theater. You know, New York is a downtown city, and so is San Francisco, and so are a few others, but very few others. Los Angeles, you know, I mean, when that business hour is over at 4 o'clock, after that you can shoot deer in downtown Los Angeles. A lot of people do. Every once in a while, if they're lucky, they get a person. But I mean, you know, it really is terrible because most people live out here, Orange County or wherever the hell they live, and they have to drive all the way back down to the Chandler Center to see theater. But there will be now, I think, you see, the thing that is beginning to happen, there is, for instance, the Huntington Hartford, which should be better run, should have better fare in it. It should be a more exciting theater, and therefore it would draw people because this is the sort of the domestic neighborhood. The Westwood Playhouse is, I think, coming along to being probably the best theater in Los Angeles. The Mark Taper is really far away. But when there is theater that does happen, like Westwood, and they really must be supported in a big way, because this is...
The other question is, are you of the school that believes that in order to be successful in theater, you have to go to New York and pay your dues, as they say, or is it possible to do it in the regional theater here in California, ACT, or the Old Globe in San Diego, or... Because everywhere I hear people saying, well, when are you going to go to New York and really get some acting experience?
No, I agree with you. See, I don't think you have to go to New York. I went to New York.
That's gratifying.
Yeah. Well, no, I started in New York. I started in London in a theater that held 150 people. And then I got a break, and that play was bought and came over to New York, and it was a big success in New York, and I came with it, you know. But I don't think you have to go to New York. As a matter of fact, I go to New York maybe twice a year and try and see as many of the plays. I think for the most part the New York theater is very boring, except off-Broadway. And then when you get to those off-Broadway theaters where the really good stuff is being done, then it's exciting. And New York, again, can afford to have off-Broadway theaters because you can get to it. You know, but I don't think you have to go to New York and be New York trained. I think that most of the actors who have stayed in New York and have made great theater careers are the people who really have not been able to make it somewhere else, maybe Hollywood. You know, I mean, they're non-photographable people, some of them. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, over there. My God. Yeah.
Hello. My question deals with the topic of art. You're something of a rather well-known collector, probably one of the better ones we have in the country today. What is your advice to the collector of art today?
Have a lot of money.
Obviously.
No, you know, no, it's really stupid that the whole thing, art has so become this. You heard the question, I guess, about how do you become a collector today? Well, have a lot of money sure as hell helps. But actually, today, art has become such a shelter for inflation and everything that it is so overpriced and so ridiculously overpriced that nobody can collect anymore except the great millionaires, and they vie for things. For instance, Lessing Rosenwald, whose money came from Sears Roebuck, decided to put together a collection of graphics for the National Gallery in Washington because we didn't have a great graphic collection in America, in Washington. And he is so rich that every time he bids on a work of art, an etching or a lithograph or something, he just says, buy it. Well, you know, this is destruction to the market, because when he says buy it, it means that it'll go right up to the very top price. It may not be worth that to anybody else, but this is what has happened to the art market. The only way to be really a good collector is to buy out of style, out of fashion, out of chic, and from your own knowledge of art. It is enormously important that you go see everything. I have had the opportunity over the 60 years that I've been going to art galleries to see a lot of things that happened. For instance, I went to New York at one time, and I was very much involved with the arts here and very limited in my viewpoint, and I read a lot about abstract expressionism and stuff. And when I got to New York this time, because I'd been working very solidly in movies and hadn't been to New York for about 5 years, I suddenly was led into the explosion, the excitement of the abstract expressionist movement with Jackson Pollock and people like that. Well, it hadn't gotten to that point where it was an investment. And the first Jackson Pollock I bought was $200. It ain't anymore. But it was through the excitement of seeing something new that I was able to buy it. Now, I had $200, and most people have got $200. I mean, you can pay $500 for one of those terrible drippy canvases, you know, that you see that are on velvet, with people with big eyes with a tear dropping down. The price of those things is unbelievable, but you must know about art. It is not just enough to say, I know what I like. I once wrote a book called I Like What I Know, because it is important and absolutely imperative. We have had, if you had been around as long as I have, you would have seen people like the great Richard Diebenkorn and all of the painters in this area and San Francisco, the West Coast artists, the Bay Area artists, who really were selling at the beginning of their careers for absolutely nothing. And you can still find it. Art never stops. Art is continual, and the growth of art is continual. Don't go to a gallery where they're only showing David Hockney. You know, David Hockney, when I first met David Hockney, you could buy any one of his pictures for $300. Now they're $30,000. Well, David Hockney ain't as young as he was. Find a new David Hockney. That's the way to collect. Collect out of style. When I put together the art department for Sears Roebuck years ago, and I thought, my God, where am I going to find enough works of art? And I went to England to all of the great galleries over there, the great galleries, Colnaghi, Nördler, all of these. And I said, what have you got that's out of style? Well, they had always handled the very best things. There was a whole period of English etching and American etching done between 1900 and 1930, which had completely gone out of style. And I went in and I bought everything I could get my hands on. Gerald Brockhurst, Frank Benson, these really great etchers who were out of style. Alphonse Legros, every one of these people, really incredible. I sold them at Sears and they were incredible. Now I go to galleries and I find these same pictures that the Sears people were paying $200 for are now $2,000 because they've come back into fashion. But there are a lot of things that are still out of fashion. Look for them. And study, look all the time. You have 4 million books. You have the most extraordinary art community here in UCLA. I know a lot about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Price, I've long been a fan of both you and your wife Coral, and I admire the risk that you take playing Oscar Wilde, like the risk she took in the killing of Sister George, and I wonder if you think that sort of artistic risk-taking is essential to the sort of survival in the arts you were referring to earlier.
Oh boy, do I ever. I think that unless you stick your neck out, you are never going to get anywhere. And playing it safe is the most difficult thing in the world, because playing it safe, you may make it, but you don't get anywhere. It really disturbs the hell out of me that the great young stars of today, Robert De Niro, who is a wonderful actor, why doesn't he go out and do plays around the country? Can you imagine what would happen if Robert Redford, when Christopher Reeves flew in here, you had 2,000 people because he is a curiosity. But Christopher Reeves doesn't sit on it. He goes out every summer and goes up to Williams, where my daughter's in college, and does plays in the summer in the theater to try himself out. He is really an adventurous guy. But most of the actors get paid so much money that they're afraid to stick their necks out. Al Pacino goes it right. He goes and does Richard III. They absolutely murdered him critically. It didn't matter at all. He was satisfying himself. It is absolutely necessary to stick your neck out. And I don't mean just playing kooky characters like this one or the one my wife played in Killing of Sister George. That's just a good part. But it is a challenge that you must accept, every one of us.
Also, I wonder if you, just more specifically, if you could tell us what Coral Brown is up to these days professionally. I've been sort of looking for her and not seeing her.
My wife, Coral Brown, is really one of the most extraordinary beauties in the first place. She was in a waiting room the other day at a doctor's office, and she had to wait 3/4 of an hour, and she's a lady of no uncertain language. And she's an Australian truck driver, to tell you the truth. She said, "Where the bloody hell is that doctor, And finally the woman came out and said, "Well, I've been looking for Miss Coral Brown, who is such and such an age." Well, she doesn't look that age because she's an actress. Actors don't look their age, or to hope they don't. And, because we've got to try and be young. But Coral is now going over to England to do a television show. Well, it's a television drama for the BBC, directed by John Schlesinger, who is one of the best directors in the world, that is about a personal experience that she had in Russia. Really very exciting one. I won't tell you any more than that, because then you won't watch it. Yeah.
Mr. Price, this is concerning your movie career, and I was wondering, I think that your best performance is in Theater of Blood, but next to that, I think that your performance of Matthew Hopkins in Michael Reeves' A Conqueror Worm is your best.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, I have two questions, whether there is anything that you could say that could elucidate the very tragic and very brilliant personality of Michael Reeves. And also, will there ever be another Dr. Phibes film?
I love those kooky films. Oh, just to preface this, it's terribly funny. In America, somebody once, a young girl gushing, taking her first movie test, said, to George Kaufman, the playwright, said, "Oh, Mr. Kaufman, all I really want to do is to be so good that someday I win the Academy Award." And he said, "Well, honey, it's a cinch. All you have to do is get the part of a drunken nun." It's absolutely true, that in America we give no awards to anyone that isn't playing drama. Comedy, which is the most difficult thing in the world to play, is absolutely ignored. Cary Grant, who was the most brilliant actor that the screen ever had, never got an award because he played comedy. But we are deadly serious people. As Oscar Wilde says, he says, they are abnormally serious people, the Americans. I think perhaps because America has never quite forgiven Europe for having been discovered first. It's true, Anyway, I just was in Paris last Christmas at a film festival of my films. Now, if you ever want to feel old, go to see yourself in 15 films. Jeez. I had hair down to here, Anyway, They, in Paris and in Rome, where there were these two film festivals of Dr. Phibes, of Theater of Blood, and back to Laura and Song of Bernadette and Keys of the Kingdom and all those films, they take the fantasy films and the science fiction films deadly seriously. They never in any way throw them off as we do here. You know, anything that isn't a drama here or based on reality, we are apt to discard as second rate. In the rest of the world, the science fiction films, the fantasy films, are taken very seriously as a matter of craft, of very good movie making. And this was extraordinary to me to find that these pictures were so seriously regarded. There is more sort of interest in that kind of film because the very first French films were science fiction films. I think there will be someday another Dr. Phibes film somewhere over the rainbow, you know, I hope. Theater of Blood was my favorite of all those films because in it I played an actor who kills off all the critics. Happily. Though I really think, you know, that these kind of films are fun and wonderful fun to do. I'm worried today about the contemporary horror films because they show everything and get nowhere. I mean, they really don't have any plot. And I'm worried about them because there's no sort of mystique about them, and I kind of think that that's important. Are you over there?
Mr. Price, I don't think you really answered
I probably didn't. I never
main part
did.
of my question. I did really want to know whether you could, concerning Michael Reeves.
Michael Reeves.
Yes.
All right. Michael Reeves was a brilliant young actor, director, who was 22 years old when I did a picture with him called The Conqueror Worm, which it was called over here. It was a very exciting picture about a witch hunter, true story. And he was a brilliant young man. We didn't like each other at all.
Yes.
He was a very neurotic young man who had no way of communicating with the actors. But I had a great feeling that he was right. Even though he didn't know how to do it, he was right. And we all felt this, all of the actors in it. There was a kind of resentment about the way he told us to do things, but we went along with it. And he was brilliant. What we didn't know was that he was on the flit. He was on the coke and the big, you know, the big stuff and the hard stuff. He was completely undisciplined young man who, after I was just about to do a second picture with him, he committed suicide. And it was really a complete waste of great talent because he had the makings of a really great young man, great young movie maker. And really, the waste that goes on in the drug scene is so terrible because it is in no way commensurate with the rewards you get in creativity.
So you would really say that it was drugs that did him in?
It was drugs that did him in and instability through that. This is what I hear.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know why, but you're welcome. Yeah.
Vincent Price to block, please.
Huh?
I was wondering if you could tell me why you did so many horror films in your film career. And
I didn't do that many horror films. Out of 110 films, I only did 20.
Well, that's kind of more than most people do at any rate.
I don't know.
And
I've seen some pretty horrible films.
I was wondering if you enjoyed doing horror films.
Have you ever seen Disney
especially.
films? Almost all of them are horrible.
Did you especially like horror films as a genre, and do you still
They weren't
like them?
horror films. They were all based on Edgar Allan Poe, Guy de Maupassant, and Nathaniel Hawthorne. Mm-hmm. They were great classic Gothic tales.
Thank you.
I don't answer anything, really, but...
Let's see.
Yeah.
Since you travel so much from the East Coast to the West Coast, how would you compare, the East Coast to the West Coast in academics, and because you go to so many colleges, and socially and creativity-wise?
How do I do what?
Since you go to the West Coast and East Coast so much, you travel between them both.
Can I tell the difference between them?
No, how would you compare them both?
East and West?
Yeah, according
no
to...
difference at all. One's on the Atlantic Ocean, the other's on the Pacific.
But, you have different types of schools academically and socially. There must be different types
Not
of...
really. Not really. No,
then,
not really. I think America's very much alike all over. I think probably... almost all of the lecturers, the popular lecturers in America, have one clause in their contract that they won't go near New York City. New York City is the worst audience in the world for a lecturer because they think they have everything and they are a lousy audience. Eleanor Roosevelt, all of us who have been successful lecturers have in our contract nowhere near New York City. It's a funny thing. New York is the only one that's that way, though. It's a very insular community. It's a tourist town.
And academically, how would you compare?
Academically,
schools?
it's a brilliant town. I mean, there's some wonderful universities there, NYU and a whole lot of them. I don't think there's much different. New York is just bigger and older and got some things a little ahead of us, that it has that are extraordinary because that was where the money center of America was. But San Francisco and Chicago and Seattle and let me tell you, I've been in all of them. I don't think there's very much difference. If you find the vitality, it's just New York is more publicized. I personally would be delighted if New York seceded from the Union. All of our information comes out of New York City, and this is very disturbing to me because I don't think they really know what's going on in America, in New York. I mean, when you think of our television commentators, the only one who ever travels into America is Charles Kuralt, and he's usually at a gas station somewhere in the Middle West. I don't know what the hell that is indicative of what goes on in the Middle West, is that Charles Kuralt is always talking about a town that has 2 parking meters. That doesn't seem to represent America to me. Any others? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Price. This question is on the area of villainy. I think most of us in here remember many, many years back being scared the pants of us by House of Wax and Theater of Blood and Dr. Phibes. And I've always wondered, how did you find your niche, or what inspired you to take up the area of villainous roles and Gothic roles?
Well, I tell you what happened, I think I figured this out. There was a period where all of us were brought out here to California right after the invention of talking pictures because we could speak well and we recorded well. Maybe some of you remember or have read, because there's so much interest in the history of the cinema, that many of the silent picture stars were not able to speak. They had no stage training. They were not able to be recorded. I never really quite knew why, but I mean, that was the thing. And so many of the great screen stars of the silent days disappeared. So out came all of the actors from New York. And we were all brought out here because we could speak well. And there was a whole sort of class of actor, Ronald Colman, Cedric Hardwicke, Basil Rathbone, a whole bunch of them came out and really took over the movies. Then, at one particular period, suddenly the whole trend of motion pictures went off in a direction so-called reality, towards reality. And that meant the advent of actors like Jimmy Dean, Marlon Brando, and the rest of that group of actors who mumble. And this is meant to be real. I literally have never met anybody who talked like Marlon Brando. That's all right. I mean, he's a common thing. But anyway, I think he's a wonderful actor. And the minute he didn't have to do it to be chic and on the top of the heap, he just cut it out. He could speak perfectly good English. But they were all talking like that, God damn it, it's like everybody uses 4-letter words now. I never meet anybody who just strings out 4-letter words. Maybe they're afraid of me. But anyway, I think that was the day when all of us who spoke well and spoke English were relegated to costume pictures. And after all, most of these sort of thrillers, horror pictures, whatever you want to call them, were costume pictures. And we were all relegated to this kind of picture if we wanted to survive. And then the Brando group, you know, the De Niro, all of these people who are wonderful actors, and no way do I run them down because I think they're brilliant. And when they don't have to use the mumble technique, they don't. You know, they can all speak perfectly good English. And I think that that is what happened to all of us, that we went into those pictures to survive. And thank God they were popular.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have time for just one more question.
Yep.
Okay. I'm currently an art major here.
You're what?
An art major.
Art major.
And the department here, and from what I've heard, that many departments across the country seem to be pushing most of us towards what they can call the field of new forms and concepts. They're saying we're not as interested in technique, we're interested in you doing installations and environments and creating experiences. And there are a lot of the professors I've spoken to consider the two-dimensional form of art a completely dead art. And I don't personally agree with this, and I was wondering what you think about this push towards the entire experience as, you know, in the place of, say, aesthetic two-dimensional work.
I think maybe that what has happened, I know exactly what you're talking about because it's absolutely true. The concentration is on the new experience and the found object, and it changes all the time. It changes from one time to another. But I think that the professors, for the most part, are older than you and know all about the two-dimensional things which they now have discarded, but which they really should bring you up to date on before they send you out on a new experience. Because to go out on what is new about an experience if you don't know what is old? You know, I really think that it's terribly important to know the history of art and to know what went before you can really appreciate the new things. And I think the new things are terribly exciting. Really terribly exciting. I'll tell you one marvelous story that I went to the Whitney a couple of years ago, and they had a marvelous show of modern sculpture. And a lot of it was the kind of stuff you're talking about. And in the middle of one room at the very top of the building, you went upstairs and you worked your way down, was a huge pile of sand. And in it were stuck cigarette butts and everything. And I thought, well, that's kind of messy, you know. I mean, just not to have an ashtray around. Well, I saw that it was numbered, and it was a work of art. And since it had said that all of the works of art were for sale, I went up to the girl and I said, I'm very interested in number 6, that pile of sand. How can I buy it? And she said, oh, it isn't for sale. And I said, but you said everything's for sale. And she said, yeah, but the question is, how would you get it home? I said, well, a vacuum cleaner would be a good idea. But there were experiences there, and one of them was a wonderful experience. There was, as I went up in the elevator, in the top of the elevator was a little sort of ball of stuff, and I asked the man who was running the elevator, I said, what's that? And he looked at me very knowingly, and he said, oh, you'll find out. I went up, got off of the top floor, and I went around, and here was a little bigger ball of fuzz, and then a little further was a little bit of fuzz bigger and in a frame, and on the way down there was a big ball of fuzz hanging on the way down, and at the second floor the fuzz was like this, and finally there was a huge thing of fuzz, and I saw that it had a label, and I said, my God, now I'm going to find out what it's called. And so I went up and looked at the label, and you know what it was called? Fuzz. I thought it was a wonderful experience. I laughed like hell. It's very seldom you get a laugh in an art gallery, you know. But seriously, you know, I know that the concept that the art teachers are telling you, which is right, to look for the changes of life, the changes. But, you know, you've got to have some kind of constant before you can find out why the changes are as exciting as they are. I find everything that's going on in the arts terribly exciting, but I don't think I really would if I didn't know what had gone on before. And I think that It's up to you to take a history of art course, and then you will find how exciting it is to break away, which in every period of art has been exactly what the artists were doing, was breaking away. Thank you all for letting me be with you. Thank you. Thank you, Lon.
This concludes our program for today. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.